The great thing about doing a radio show and a podcast is that you get to talk to all of your friends. The great thing about doing this podcast is that you get to talk to the people you've matched with on dating profiles. And so I'm happy to introduce one of the first people I ever actually matched with, Nicole Ananda. Oh my God, I screwed that up. Can I just start over? Because it's embarrassing. No, we'll keep rolling. I like to. Nicole Ananda, so for people who don't know, which maybe most of our audience right now, you are not just a divorced mother. You are also my shaman. You are like my spiritual guide, correct?
I didn't realize that. I guess so.
You totally realized it. We talked about this a couple of weeks ago where I come to you with existential crises and you solve them for me.
Yeah, I guess I kind of thought of myself as your life coach, but
I don't know the difference. And I'm not even being flippant about it. Like what do you do? Let's just, why don't you give me the elevator on what you do professionally? Because I think it's very, very interesting to all of the people who are listening.
Okay. So I do kind of a range of things, and I have a clinical practice based around surrogate partner therapy, which is an experiential modality of sex therapy. Basically, we have people come to us with different sexual dysfunctions or issues or intimacy problems, relationship problems, and we have them work in what's called a triadic model with a clinical therapist and a surrogate partner and the client, and that makes the triad. And so the clinical therapist helps them process their experiences, and the surrogate partner gives them actual real-life relational experiences to help work through their issues. So that is the main work that I do, I guess, to support myself. But then the work that is my calling is shamanic healing and energy work. And so I do that on a donation basis, actually. Anybody who needs any type of spiritual healing or shamanic healing. I also am trained in ritual abuse and deprogramming. So I work with people who have had extreme trauma and ritual abuse. And for those people who, I don't know how they find me, the right people always just find me. They just come to me looking for some, with, I guess, the existential crises or kind of big spiritual problems or some kind of dark night of the soul. And I do a different type of work with them, which is more, so the surrogate partner therapy is interactive, and the shamanic work is more like, for them, receptive. They just kind of receive the healing.
Okay. I want to ask specifically with relation to some of the people who are listening, and I want to stress this with people all the time who are listening to the show. The site is called the Divorce Dad Playbook, but it is so much more than just divorced dads. It's single dads, it's divorced women, it's obviously divorced moms. It's really everyone. So I wanted to ask you, how many of your clients in either of those disciplines, how many of your clients come to fix themselves, and how many come to fix their relationships?
Ooh, that's a good question. I'd say they all come to fix themselves. They're all there to fix themselves, and a lot of them don't have relationships. So on the surrogate partner therapy side, a lot of them are not in relationships and haven't been for a long time, or have given up on love or relationship, or have had so many negative or traumatic experiences that they're afraid to put themselves out there. And what they need is to have a, kind of a healing, loving, unconditionally accepting experience to learn to love themselves again and have enough confidence to go out and feel like they can face dating. But I do get a, were you going to ask a question?
No, I was just sorry to cut you off, but that's where you and I connected. I feel that when I first started talking to you about what you did, I said to you, like, I shouldn't date you. I should hire you, because I had been married for 17 years and I all of a sudden was thrust out into this world that I had no idea what was going on. I'd never been online dating. I had never really gone on an adult date, I feel like. And so what do you do in those situations? And I was terrified. I even put that in my profile at the beginning. I said, I've been single for the first time in 20 years and terrified. And actually it worked, which is funny because I think people gravitated toward that, but it was the truth. And I came to you and asked, like, sort of how I understand if I'm in a somewhat clinical scenario, I talk to a therapist every week and I can process things with her that I can't necessarily process. It took me years to be able to process those things on my own in real time. But
Mhm.
with sexual anxiety and all of the other issues that go along with that, how do some of your clients deal with that? Like it might be productive and they feel a sense of self when they're with you, but what happens when they're out in the real world? Like how do you prepare them for that?
Well, that's a good segue, because to finish answering your first question, I'd say about a quarter of my clients are people like you who are either transitioning out of a long-term relationship or who are newly single and lost, and they don't really know how to relate to themselves and others. Um, and there's a really big concept in surrogate partner therapy that we call generalizing, right? Which
Mhm.
everything that we teach them, we want them to then learn how to generalize and use out in the world with other people, because we don't want them to associate that just with us and get kind of attached or think that that can only happen with us. And what really happens is we teach them to be like us. So we are kind of their teacher, and we guide and lead them. And then we teach them how to take on that role when they go out to do their dating and relationships, because most people have not been in any way educated on how to do relationships,
No.
how to relate to other people. Most people are incredibly dysfunctional, and almost every family is dysfunctional. And so we grow up with these attachment patterns and relational patterns that are very maladaptive, and try to have relationships, and then they're, a nightmare and a shit show. And
Hi.
yes, me too. I mean, I've learned through experience and also through studying this to do it for myself. And so we basically have to teach them how to go out and then teach others. So that's the way that we prepare them, because everything I do for them, I say, okay, now you're going to have to go and be the one who models consent, who models communication, who models being present and really
Yeah.
like focusing, like dealing with all of the difficult issues. And so they learn how to do that with us and get enough confidence that they can go out and then kind of take that leadership role.
It's interesting because I feel on my own level that it wasn't until I realized how much damage other people have and how similar that felt to what I was going through, where I felt comfortable with people in like an intimate setting. I felt at the beginning it was more of a performance, like I had to be good.
Hmm.
And it was like there's an expectation if someone comes home with you or if you go on a third date or whatever it is, that this is the time where that stuff happens. And it was just so much panic and anxiety. Um, I know on your website that people come to you and excuse me, and you try to explain to them, and I read this like 3 or 4 times on your site, to get out of your own head and sort of live in your body.
Yes.
That's not, I mean, that's easier said than, I mean, I've dealt with stuff and I talk about this on the show all the time, but like last week I made a stupid decision. I got stood up, I got ghosted. I thought I need to get this out of my system, and I called somebody else, and it was horrible. And it made me fall into a hole for a week because I tried to force something that
Mhm.
I was not emotionally or frankly even physically equipped to handle at that time.
Yeah, the better thing to do would have been to sit with those feelings of disappointment and rejection and process them so that they could move out and through.
And
But,
call you is what I really should have done instead of
yes,
calling the
you
person I
probably should
did.
have done that.
Nevertheless, here we are.
Yeah, so embodiment is the foundation of the work that I do in surrogate partner therapy. Um, because most people are really just walking around like disembodied heads. They're just in their head all the time, thinking, with their minds running, making up stories. It's crazy. And it's when you're able to really drop down and integrate and feel your body and be in your body, every single experience you have can be an orgasmic experience. Eating, just sitting, showering. So we actually give as homework for people what's called Vipassana meditation, where it's a meditation by doing. And I'll have them a few times a week do a really mindful meal where they look at their food and smell it and
Yeah.
feel the textures and really experience deeply. And also a mindful shower where they, instead of thinking about what they're going to do next, they listen to the sounds of the water, and they feel the different sensations We also teach people to move their consciousness and their reference point. So I'll tell them to feel your fingers as they touch your scalp when you're washing your hair, and then shift your awareness to feeling your scalp as your fingers are touching it. And it's the same action, but it's two different points of reference, and it teaches people to learn how to just shift their consciousness into their body in a more powerful way.
Funny you say with the fingers, because one of the coping mechanisms that I developed when I learned mindfulness for the first time was to do this, where you touch every finger. And what I learned is if you do it with one hand, it's pretty easy. But when you have to do it with both hands, and you have to actually try to consistently do this while either talking to someone, it takes actually a decent amount of brain power, and you eliminate all of the other things that were getting your mind going crazy, because you're focusing literally on making sure that both fingers touch at the same time on either hand. I've been able to do it pretty well, but that was one of those weird sort of tricks that seems to be similar to what you're talking about.
Similar. We also do it in our sessions. We do touch exercises where we have people just focus on their own sensation, because the problem, like you've mentioned, is most people are in performance mode and not pleasure mode.
Right.
And I hate the word performance. I hate that whole concept. The point is to come together and feel connection and feel pleasure and play together, right? And have a fun, pleasurable, connected experience. And people get so caught up in what's going to happen next, right? Am I doing it right or wrong?
Yeah.
What is my dick going to do, right? Am I going to come? Are they going to come? And it takes all the connection away, because if I'm with you and you're in your head, you're not with me. You're not present with me. You're somewhere else. And so people are having these two separate experiences rather than.
And I've felt that too. It's interesting you say it like that, because there have been times where I have felt very connected to someone, and it almost feels like none of those issues come up at all. And afterwards you're kind of like, well, that was a relief, but it's the other way around, right? It's not that was a relief. It's because I'm connected to that person, everything worked out. The other people, maybe I'm trying to force a connection, or it's one of those things where you feel like that's what is supposed to happen and you force it. And that's when you get in your head, because you're not actually connected to the person, at least in my experience. And so I'll ask you this again. I feel like this is a very therapeutic thing for me. How do I stop doing that?
Well, one of the best ways to stop doing that is to slow down, right? Slow down, get off what we call, one of the people on my team calls the sexcalator, right? Where, you kind of start, and so many people have this kind of, it's great, right? Have this routine that they go through, and I do this and then that, and then this leads to this, and it becomes very mechanical. And if you can just let go of that and just get really present and feel your sensations in your body, look in the eyes of the person you're with, and just kind of be present with them and let yourself feel the flow of what should happen next rather than doing. So it's kind of dropping into a more, I wouldn't call it passive, more of a receptive state of being rather than an active state of doing. And then whatever intuitively is right between the two of you will start to emerge and will come together. And then you'll start to kind of almost act as one and just feel what should happen. And for me, I think, the way that our culture approaches sex and views sex, it's so incredibly physical and mechanical, and it's not spiritual. And in my best sexual experiences, it's a spiritual experience, where I'm literally becoming one body and soul with another person. And that's the kind of sex I like best, regardless of what physically is happening and who's having orgasms or not, or how good someone's technique is or whatever, because technique is another stupid thing. There's no such thing, right? It's just tuning into the person you're with and feeling what works for them.
Which is actually funny, and I don't want to get too much into it, but that's actually come up a couple of times in my favor, I think I'll say, where people are like, I always ask the question, like, do people just have like a script, like that old Seinfeld episode where like they're looking on their hand to see like, what do I do next? Like, you have to understand what the other person is asking for physically to know what you're able or willing to give. And I do think it's difficult to get to that point, especially when you have all the anxieties and whatnot. So I want to speak about that. I have two more questions for you. One about the anxiety. And this is maybe just selfishly asking this, but what are your thoughts on medication, on antidepressants, anti-anxiety? Because a lot of what you do, it sounds to be not necessarily the opposite of that, but I would imagine a supplement to that, or a way to maybe back off from that. And that's what I hope to do, is eventually like get off of some of the medication because I'm doing more of the things that you're teaching.
Yes. I'm glad you asked that. And my opinion on that might be slightly controversial, but I am really against medication in general for long-term and chronic use. I think sometimes medication is helpful in the short term when someone is in crisis. And sorry, can you hear that truck in the background? Okay.
We hear everything. It's fine.
Okay.
I started this out by like saying your name. I mean, this is like the most professional thing you've ever done, isn't it?
Wait, what is this podcast?
Yeah, we just no, but you know what's fun about that? And like most people, I said like let's start over. Most people would have just started over. I've done a million shows. They're like, oh, can we start? I did that on purpose because honestly, like this is life. Like sometimes you screw up. I've known you for what, 5 months, and the one time I have to say your last name when people are listening, I say it wrong. Like it's ridiculous, but it's life, and I don't want to fake it. So
yes,
here we are.
well,
The
yeah.
truck is there. Embrace the truck.
So there's the trash truck in the background. So for me, in terms of medication, I do think, so I'm not a psychiatrist, I'm not a doctor, so I would never tell somebody to be on or off medication because that would be unethical and irresponsible. But when it comes down to my personal opinion and the research that I've done, most psychotropic medications have an incredibly low efficacy rate. So if you're talking about something that has the same or lower efficacy as the placebo, then what are we talking about here? Probably
Right.
a lot of it is placebo, and we see that with most people who get on any kind of like, especially antidepressant medications. They work for a period of time and then they stop working because the placebo effect has worn off, and then they're constantly either upping the dose or
Correct.
switching the medications, and none of that is dealing with the root issue of what's causing the depression and anxiety. So all it is a Band-Aid with a ton of side effects, and a lot of them sexual side effects.
Exactly.
Right? That are not really ever going to help you get better. The things that we teach are addressing the root causes of the problems and what's going on, and helping you heal yourself so that you don't need that stuff. So I would never tell somebody don't go on medication, but what we often do at my work is we help people get off of it because we're giving them the tools and the foundation to be a healthy, integrated person so that they don't need the medication. And
no, I'm not smiling because of that. I'm smiling because that would be the best like tagline ever. We help you get off.
Yes, it's very
in any way you need to.
I love
Just
that.
my own personal thoughts on this, having gone through this, and I, maybe I'm doing this wrong, but I do mention it as you know, like I'm super honest about all this stuff and very open about my issues, both mentally, but then obviously the irony to me is how much you feel sexual side effects when you're dealing with anxiety medication and depression, because what is the most anxiety inducing thing? Poor sexual performance. I know you hate that word. And then that leads to depression because, oh, that didn't work. So it's hilarious that the side effects of the medication that are supposed to be helping you are actually creating situations that put you in those mental states. And it's just a never ending cycle.
Yes. Yeah. One of the things I highly recommend for most people, which a lot of people don't like hearing that in our hookup culture, is wait until you really know someone and have a good connection before you have sex with them. Because then however it goes, you have enough of a foundation of mutual understanding and care that it's not a big deal if it doesn't go exactly how you want it to, and you can kind of laugh it off together and keep working on it, right? The places where you're getting these high stakes, I better do it right and make myself look good, or when we don't know somebody and we're trying to have some kind of porn-like experience, and if you're not able to really just let go and have it go however it goes and not care, it's probably not a good idea to do those things.
Well, it's funny because actually, and in some cases, I have been very clear about like, hey, you know what? Shit might not work right now because I'm on a lot of medication and I can't feel anything. And so sometimes that's worked in my favor because then it's just like, let's just mess around and have fun and see what happens. Other people, I think, and maybe that's more speaking to what you just said, feel like they did something wrong, or they're like, well, you didn't finish or whatever. And I'm like, yeah, I don't care about that. Like, that's fine. I would rather do what we did for 20 minutes than do that for 3 minutes and then be done. Like, that was a more enjoyable experience. And people have a hard time wrapping their head around that because they think it's like, let's just get to the end. The end is the best part. No one wants to see a fireworks show without the grand finale.
Yes. And a lot of the men I work with have had, what I wouldn't like, what you called, what did you call it? Poor performance or something. I would call just negative sexual experiences, right? Because
Yeah,
they kind of had something go the way they didn't want it to go. And they've been shamed for it. Either their partner has taken it personally, like it meant something about them, or they weren't desirable, or you don't want me enough, or just kind of put them down for it. And that is, that's so damaging. That will just shut somebody down.
yeah.
And so a lot of what we help them work through is just, hey, this happens, and look, we're all fine, right? We can still have fun together. We can still enjoy ourselves. It's not all about you and what your dick's doing.
Right. And actually it's interesting because it took me talking with my therapist to realize that the reason I was on the medication that was causing those issues was because I pretty much thought I was going to die. And I was so anxious when I started dating again because I knew I couldn't feel anything. And I knew that I was going to have anxiety because I was only with somebody for, one person for 20 years or whatever. Once I got over myself and I realized I'm on the medication because of what was happening, I wouldn't be here without it. And so for now, at least for the next however long, while I need this, if it creates a little bit of sexual dysfunction for me, I wouldn't even be with this woman. I wouldn't even be with anyone. I wouldn't be here for my kids without that necessity. And I don't want to lean on the medication too much. But once I realized, like, you know what? I'm just should be happy I'm here. If it doesn't work out, oh, well, that's when I started to relax and I was able to sort of have a more enjoyable experience no matter what happened.
Yeah. And in that case, that's one of the cases where in crisis, medication can be really helpful and useful because it can help get you from a place of not functioning to being able to kind of pull yourself together and function. But I think that really, oh, now there's some other.
Yeah. Was there
Oh my
recycling
God.
comes now?
It's like Grand Central Station here right now.
I once did an interview with Kenny Mayne from ESPN, and the entire interview, like a half hour, he was driving back and forth from his house to the dumpster, like the city dump or whatever, and he had to like throw. He's like, hold on a second. He's like throwing like a couch into a. Yeah, and I'm like, this is great. It was like the best episode we ever had. So it's fun.
Oh,
This is
good.
awesome.
Well, this will be the second best then. But
Well, he wasn't on this show. I don't. That was definitely a different topic, but nonetheless.
But I would really love to see medical doctors, psychiatrists really be trained in how to get people out of crisis using medication and then not rely on medication for the rest of their lives. And same thing in actually, any kind of medical situation. I mean, my father just found out that he's diabetic, and he was pre-diabetic for a while, and his doctor kept wanting to put him on medication, and he said, no thanks, I'm just going to go home and eat better. And then he would, and he'd come back, and then his numbers would be fine. Same thing happened with my ex-husband and cholesterol, and they said, we're going to put you on Lipitor for the rest of your life, and he was like, no, and just went and changed his life and his habits. And that should always be the first, unless you're in absolute crisis where you need that shot of insulin or you're going to die, or you need that medication like you did,
Right.
or else you might kill yourself or just fall apart. They really need to then learn how to transition people into how do you live a healthy life and heal yourself and take care of yourself and heal those root issues. And I really think we need such an overhaul, and don't even get me started on, Viagra and all that stuff and the urologists, because
Well,
that's nuts.
next time you're on, we'll have that conversation. Yeah. I call it pills on pills on pills. What if the pills I'm on don't allow me to feel anything, then the only way I've learned to solve it is another pill.
Yeah.
Which,
right. Exactly.
You know what? For now, like, it is what it is. My last question for you, and it actually, I've been wanting to talk to you about this for a while, because and so I'm glad we're doing this like while everyone else can listen, and it's not just the two of us. I've really tried over the last month or two to not use mindfulness as a coping skill or as a defense mechanism, but to be more proactive and use that in the things I'm doing in my life. And I feel like I'm at a point now where I can appreciate some of the things, like you mentioned at the beginning with the shower or with eating. I am very into that. For me, it's sweeping the floor. If you sweep the floor with a broom, it is the most mindful exercise. If you hear the bristles hitting the floor, it's just amazing and calming. And there's other things I mentioned, the finger, like there's other ways to do that. Most of them were to cope. But now that I'm able to do this and to be more present, I feel like on a lot of these dates that I've gone on, I'm not looking at my phone. I'm not checking Tinder or Bumble or whatever to see who else is. I'm present with the person I'm with. But what's happened is I get a very like swift yet definitive connection with these people because I feel like I'm so invested, and that has made these connections feel stronger quicker than maybe they are. And I'm not sure what to do there, because honestly, sometimes that lasts. Sometimes it's fire. And then the next day the woman's like, what the hell what just happened? I can't ever talk to you again. And I'm like, well, that's not great. I mean, I thought it was fun. She's like, yeah, it was fun, but that's not who I am. And my thought is like, maybe it is who you are. And so I've had difficulty with that because I feel very impulsive. The ADHD stuff we talked about, the H and the bipolar stuff. And I have some impulse control issues that has gotten me in a little bit of trouble where I feel the connection. So I'm like, I'm going with this. This is a strong connection. Is it fake? Am I convincing myself of that? Or is it the mindfulness of being present is just a different experience?
I think, well, first of all, that sweeping exercise you do is very Buddhist. I like that.
Oh, nice.
It's incredibly Buddhist to be able to get deeply present while sweeping. I would say it's the presence. So when you're able to, and for me, the more, I mean, I've always been very embodied, and it's kind of, I guess, a gift that I was born with, and present and able to connect. And for me, I can connect like that with pretty much anyone, any person, a stranger. Within 5 minutes, I can connect so deeply and feel that oneness, because we really all, if you get down to the spiritual side of it, we are all one and we're all connected. And all of this is just energy and vibration. And there's no difference between you and me. When we're next to each other and you look at it in an atomic and quantum level, it's all just one, right? So you're tapping into this kind of quantum field of oneness and feeling what's real, which is that we are all really deeply connected. We just mostly are so caught up in the separateness and the 3D world that we don't feel that, and we're in our heads and we don't really acknowledge it. So when you're getting into that place of presence, I think that it's genuine, because for me, it feels genuine. I mean, I can have a human being in front of me I've never met before and just be like, I just love you.
Yeah.
And
that's honestly how the two of us started talking. It was like, we talked for like a couple of days. We've actually never been in the same room, which is hilarious.
No.
It was amazing that is the truth. But maybe the second time I talked to you, I was like, this woman's going to be my best friend for like 10 years, or like one of my best friends for a while, because there was that connection right away. Whether it was, I didn't even care if it was physical. And usually you do care about that. You're like, oh, it didn't matter to me if we never do anything or always do it. It was just, there was something there. So I totally get that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And actually it was like 7 or 8 months ago. So we maintained it without ever meeting each other, this connection for that long. And it's interesting because for me, a lot of times when I match with someone on a dating site, I get this intuitive feeling, and sometimes it's someone who I wouldn't normally pick, or I don't feel like is my type, but I just feel like there's a reason I'm supposed to know this person. And I think you were one of those people.
I agree with that. And I'll ask you this on the show, so you have to say yes. Will you come back and will you do this again? You can be like the divorced dad, Playbook, shaman, Reiki healer.
Absolutely. I thought you were going to ask me something that might be hard to say yes to.
Well, now I have to think of that for next time.
I don't know. Will you come over here and, I don't know.
Oh my gosh.
No.
On that note, thank you so much for doing this.
You're welcome. Thank you.